Hello everyone, I'm Danny Flexen, he is Ayman Khan, and we are here with the latest edition of SO Live. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. We're an ever-growing family, extended family, and everyone, more or less, is welcome. Ayman, how's your week been? And you know what the main topic is, so we'll get to that in a minute, but how's everything with you, first of all? Let's do some pleasantries for a change.
Pleasantries, bring them all, lock them up all onto my plate, and let's eat them all up. Yeah, I'm good, Danny. Very good to have been in amongst the thick of it in the action at the Queensbury card. Very good to be chopping up with all you guys and yourself, Danny, as well, too. Great to have you all in here on SO Live, not missing a week where we can. So make sure you get your comments in. Make sure if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe. We'll be discussing it all in this hour or so. Let's get into it.
And Warren's got a new enemy. Papa's got a brand new bag. Yeah, I was very disappointed because of all the Saudi stuff. Warren and Hearn, Eddie Hearn, the old enemy, if you like, or I suppose Barry Hearn would be the old enemy. They're making nice. They're happy. They're working together. It's a bit sickening, really. I'm not entirely happy about it. But we were worried that we'd not see the kind of bitter, nasty, violent Frank Warren anymore. And I've mentioned it to him in interviews as well. Now he feels this needs kind of be a bit nicer about Eddie Hearn, even on the subjects that they've criticised each other about in the past. It's the same on Hearn's side. But all we needed to do, apparently, was to interview Alex Krassyuk, which was actually harder, easier said than done, but we got there in the end, and have him say some stuff that really, really pissed off Frank Warren. Because after Alex Krassyuk, I did the interview with him last week, and he said, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but he said he doesn't believe the cut sustained by Tyson Fury that forced the postponement of the undisputed fight with Oleksandr Usyk was sustained in the sparring session that's gone round on video for everyone to see. He feels it happened earlier, and the Fury team were kind of putting their ducks in a row, getting their story straight before they released this news to the media. Doesn't doubt the legitimacy of the cut, just when it happened and whether that video represents it. But when my colleague here, Ayman Khan, tried to present this point of view impartially, because, bias out and all that, tried to present that view to Frank Warren, he barely got to the end of his sentence before Frank almost bit his head off, although I believe he was biting off Alex Krassyuk's head and Adam Catterall's, who we didn't even mention. But Ayman was, by proxy, in the firing line. And were you surprised? I imagine you were delighted as well because of the content. But were you surprised by the virulence of Frank Warren's response?
Yeah, everyone always says delighted to be joined by. Maybe in that moment I wasn't quite as delighted to be joined by Frank, but I understood that there was going to be some form of reaction from Frank. Yeah, obviously the point is there that there isn't the legitimacy to what the video was. There isn't legitimacy of what the cut was. There isn't the legitimacy of the bottom line as to Tyson Fury pulling out. Now, that's not how we feel it or see it is here. We kind of see it as a face value and the cut is legitimate and such, but they have their point of view, Krassyuk's team. We put that to Frank to see how he felt about it. And naturally, the position from Frank is going to be to defend his man's place. And I know that sometimes Tyson Fury is vocal. Sometimes he's not so much vocal. I think he employed a social media blackout, and that seems to have extended heading into this new rescheduled date. So Tyson Fury himself, we haven't heard too much from, although he has done a couple of social media posts here and there on it. So it leaves Frank to have to battle, and Frank is always going to back his man. Frank has no other reason as to doubt as to why the cut happens. And also, look, the bottom line to it as well, like Tyson Fury wants this fight. Frank Warren wants this fight. They've promised a date. They can't quite meet it, and it's been rescheduled. Everything has happened as quick and as fast as possible there, but it was a bit funny when it came to Frank saying idiots feeding idiots. So I don't know if it means us or me holding the mic being the idiot in that moment,
eating it up. We're the ones
that's right.
Fed.
It might have been a one step closer if I pushed it a little bit more to me being the target of the vitriol, as he said that. But no, I think Frank has his position to protect his client and his clients, because looking at this as a whole, Fury was kind of the darling now, coming back from when he had the time out of the ring, when he ballooned up in weight, come back. He was the darling of the boxing fans, and he's lost a lot of that shine now with a lot of the stuff he says. And sometimes when when these sort of things happen, because Fury has said this and then changed his mind instantly and said that, and I know he's playing for the headlines, and I get it, he's savvy in that sort of sense, but for boxing fans, it turns people off. So it means that they doubt what he says or what can come out from him. It means that Frank Warren has to really kind of push back on it, and that's what we got. That's what I got.
And just before we go to the chat for the first time in today's episode, we are going to put the poll out. We're going to get it out nice and early, and it's a very simple one. It's a binary choice, yes or no. Do you think Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk happens as planned in the second instance on May the 18th? Yes or no? Let's see how much skepticism remains among the public boxing fandom at large. So let's go to the chat, and there's a absolute load of them already. So I'll do the job of Thunder Road and say, we've got 130 watching right now. Make sure you give us a thumbs up so that the popularity reflects the amount of people watching, assuming you do all like it, obviously. Cumry Carper Neil says, why is it that no other fighter gives Frank Warren the same problems as Fury does? I imagine it's kind of with any superstar in any walk of life, isn't it? You know, the more famous you are, the more diva-like you become, I guess. And the more ripples your behavior causes as well, not always intentionally. Who else have we got here? Ramoni Mode XD, he's a true fighting man. Presumably he's talking about Ayman there. Ryan Walterson, about to see Warren try to bully Krassyuk to his agenda. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Krassyuk, I don't know if Krasyuk's for turning, to be honest. I think he's quite tough in his own right. You might not see as much vitriol from him in interviews, but I think he's got a steely inner core. Ramoni Mode XD talking about Prince Nassim. Thunder Road. I spoke too soon. He is here. What's he said? Thunder Road. Damn, already 125 plus watch. It's 143 now, Thunder Road. Says, let's hit that thumbs up in caps. OG God. Surely there's only one God, and he is the OG. Never mind. We're not here for religion. I wonder what Warren will say when Fury backs out again. Well, I hope you voted in the poll, OG God. If you think Fury is going to back out, I hope you voted no to whether it happens on May the 18th. Matty Howard, not hard to piss off Frank Angry Warren. It's been a while, though. He's mellowing in his older age. And getting on now with Eddie Hearn, I think, we thought he'd been put out to pasture this angry side for a while. Feed the Bear says, Matty. Oh, no, he's talking to Matty. Talk to us, guys. Don't just talk to each other. Chris, we hear Fury and Warren are on the rocks. Yeah, there has been some rumours going around that there's some issues between Team Fury and Frank Warren. So we could talk about that a little bit more. Ayman was obviously at the Warren show over the weekend, so maybe he's heard more than me. I don't know. Sultan Ibragimov says, is May the 18th date a placeholder just to stop the IBF WBA playing hardball and calling it a mandatory, but when it comes to it, it'll get rescheduled again? It's interesting because from what Krassyuk was saying, the IBF will not do a further extension beyond May the 18th. So I think he'll be very much looking, because Turki Al Sheikh's obviously made that declaration that if either fighter pulls out, not only will they have to pay a forfeit, but a replacement opponent for either guy, whoever's left standing, will be made. I think Krassyuk will be pushing for that if Fury was the one to pull out again. Sultan Ibragimov says Frank's chosen the questions. I'm not sure he's talking about us there, but it's certainly not true. George Hearn, is Warren and Krassyuk attending this live? No, they're not, George Hearn. We've made no such claim. SO Live's here every week. We've been doing this for quite a long time now. We are a discussion show. Do occasionally have guests on, but certainly not Warren and Krassyuk this time around. Chris says, OG means original gangster, Danny. Lol, like Frank Warren. Yeah, or maybe Frank Warren is the OG God. But OG, maybe he's in our chat right now. So maybe I'm wrong. Whoever I spoke to previously and said they're not on the show. Maybe Frank Warren is on the show. We just don't know it's him. Maybe he's under an alias. Ambient Wanderer says, boxing is heading in the right direction right now with Eddie and Frank working together to make these fights happen. I couldn't agree more, but I like to see a bit of spice. I like to see a bit of bite. And if they're not providing it in the fighters, then I like to see the promoters kind of going back and forth. So I'm glad Krassyuk and Warren seem to be getting it on a little bit. Ramoni Mode XD, Usyk asked for the 10 million pullout clauses. Usyk manager said in an interview. It's actually Usyk's trainer, Sergei Lapin, who asked for the $10 million forfeit clause. Usyk's manager did say it in an interview. It was my interview. It was Sergei Lapin. And that's why they called it the Lapin clause. Because he's the guy who trains and manages Usyk's training camp. Matty Howard, Danny, what do you think, Fury, turn up or not? I don't think he pulls out again, truthfully. I would vote yes in the poll. It does happen on May the 18th, but you never know. Theo Adamson, a Warren and Krassyuk coming on here. I feel like we're getting trolled now. Anyone who watches SO Live on a regular basis, or even Seconds Out as a channel, knows that we do this every week, and we don't have fighters or promoters on here as guests. It's a podcast format. But yeah, they're not coming on. A bit of clickbait, says George Hearn, although he's misspelt my name, so it automatically renders anything he says as nonsense. And I'm sure George Hearn's not his real name either. Newsflash. But yeah, so that's it from the chat for the minute. But yeah, just to reiterate, we are not expecting Alex Krassyuk or Frank Warren to actually appear live on this edition of SO Live. So I hope that hasn't disappointed too many of you. Please do stick around. But yeah, Ayman, you were at the Warren show at the weekend. Obviously, great win for Hamzah Sheeraz, which we'll talk about in due course. But did you get any sort of inkling of any issues between the Warren team and the Fury team, beyond him kind of almost biting your head off at the question of the fight and the cut?
No, nothing at all. I know that it was asked if there was any friction between Fury and Warren had batted it off. He said, has this come from Igis Klimas, who said that Fury had done himself over with a frying pan to get the cut? So he bashed, he completely brushed it off, and he literally said, next question after that. So no, it was kind of the first kind of murmurings I'd heard of anything at all between, some sort of rift between the two. It must have flown over my head if there was any talk about that. But no, there was no discussions between media either as well during the time as to whether there was any rift between Fury and Warren. So it'd be the first I'd heard as well too. So no, I don't put any stock in any rift between Fury and Warren as of right now. But I imagine, look, if there is anything to do with that, it might be exacerbated with the likes of TalkSport and such. Who I know that Frank was very unhappy with TalkSport and Adam Catchell specifically, as he mentioned, with TalkSport doubting putting it across their airwaves the legitimacy of Fury's injury in the wake of it. I know that everyone was up in arms and had the discussions at the time, as we had the discussion as well too. But I think Fury really kind of went in and really pushed against Tyson Fury and it being not legitimate. So I think Frank was very much unhappy with that, and that Fury has been unhappy with TalkSport as well too. But I think they're both sort of on the same sort of sides with that. Although I believe TalkSport appear at the Queensberry shows, but not so much at Fury shows, because Fury doesn't want them there at current. But no rift between those, but not any rift between Fury and Warren.
Yeah, Warren seems to absolutely despise Adam Catterall. I'm not sure how much of that is deserved or not. I don't watch lots of the TalkSport content, but I'm sure there's another story there behind the scenes. But yeah, we're not clickbaiters here at Seconds Out, as we've just established, but we can be massive shit stirrers, if I'm honest. And we put out a clip out from the Krassyuk interview earlier today, 4 o'clock, so about an hour before this episode started, just to kind of stir things back up again. And the main headline we've gone with, which is a direct quote from Krassyuk, is that he's not at all sure. I think, he's not at all confident that Tyson Fury is healed and ready in time for that May the 18th date. I'm sure Warren will probably get his hackles up all over again upon reading that, albeit an interview that's already been out for a week, or almost a week. But yeah, Krassyuk's not confident that Fury's ready in time. And to be honest, looking at the severity of the cut, if it's all genuine and we're to believe the pictures we've seen, and I have no reason not to, it does seem like it's going to be a while before he can get back to sparring. We interviewed Spencer Oliver also last week, and he said he's got real concerns that Fury's not going to be ready, his cut's not going to be healed in time to get the level and the length, the amount, duration of sparring that he needs to get ready for what is the biggest fight of his life against a sharp, tricky southpaw like Oleksandr Usyk. Without risking the cut reopening, of course. We don't know if Fury's going to change his training regime that he's had for so long, if he's going to start wearing the full face head guard with the cheek pieces for extra protection, whether he's going to go lighter in sparring, whether he's going to ask his sparring partners to do similar. Fury likes good body spar. Is that going to play more of a part as we go forward into the second stage of his camp once it resumes? There's a lot of questions still to be answered, and it does seem like May the 18th too soon. It seems like they kind of rushed that day out to assuage the concerns of the public and more so the IBF, as someone mentioned earlier. But now it's in place with the $10 million forfeit and the promise to replace whoever does pull out, if anyone does. It's very difficult to imagine them putting it back again. Another thing that Krassyuk revealed, and it's not going to be a big shock to anyone out there, is that they've already kind of highlighted Filip Hrgović, the IBF mandatory contender, as who they would face, who they would want to draft in as the substitute opponent if Fury were to withdraw once more. Obviously, Turki Al-Sheikh has said that if Usyk is the one to withdraw, he'd like to match Fury with Anthony Joshua. I don't see Usyk withdrawing. Even if he's got a little niggle or something, after everything that's happened and how long he's waited, I can't see him pulling out unless it's incredibly serious. So, yeah, I think that we could see Usyk taking his IBF mandatory against Hrgović on May the 18th, because I think if anyone pulls out, and this is echoing what Shane McGuigan said last week, if anyone were to pull out, it's much more likely to be Fury because he's already carrying an injury. But we shall see. Ayman, what do you think? How confident are you? And this is the poll question. So people in the chat, please do vote in the poll. How confident are you that Fury versus Usyk takes place on May the 18th?
It's hard to say how confident I am, just because I'm at the point of stage in boxing where with fights like these, you never truly believe it until you see them walking into the ring. I know that's become a lot more of a cliche, but I'm echoing that cliche here for sure, because it's just how I feel about some of the big fights in boxing right now. Although Turki Al-Sheikh is making the push, and we seem to be getting them a lot more over the line now these days, with the likes of Garcia and Davis last year. Hopefully going to get Haney and Garcia as well soon in April. It's still kind of puts me in a position where, look, I'll switch on and I'll believe it when I'm watching the fight unfold, as it were. I think it is concerning because obviously that cut's got to heal, and you got a spine. You would want a complete unaltered camp heading into a fight of this magnitude, a fight that will give you that legacy. I'm sure Fury wouldn't want to be someone who's detrimented by that. But for all intents and purposes, when I've spoken to fighters and I've asked the question of it, would you see this as a target? Would you see this as a weakness, bearing in mind this cut has happened in sparring recently, and bearing in mind also the cuts that he's had and the severe ones he's had against Wallen, where he's had to come through that? Would you see that as a target? And every fighter said, look, that's obvious. You would naturally look to want to target that to get the victory. So it's a big painted target on him heading into that fight for Usyk, who's an accurate puncher. And then also adding into that as well too. But then sorry, on the inverse, when I've spoken to likes Hearn or other fighters I've seen, or other people in the industry who have real good knowledge of training camps, of cuts as well too, they don't seem all that worried actually that the fight won't go ahead, and think that 3 months is enough time. They think that maybe about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that the cut will have healed and he can then spar again. So their kind of lack of concern gives me a bit more confidence. But then also add into the fact as well that, as we're led to believe, from the little nuggets regarding Turki Al-Sheikh's health, he really wants the fight to happen as soon as possible. He doesn't want a further delay. He's the one in the driving seat. He's the one that can add a bit more pressure to get the fight over the line, because he's really dictating everything over in that season. He's the one paying for these fights happening. And I think with his timeline with things, I don't know what the situation is there, but with that push, with that seemingly urgent nature, I think he'll want to get it over the line as well too. So I stand pretty confident as he can be really in May 18th. I would although be very disappointed if it didn't happen again.
Cymru Carper Neil says, if it was an elbow that caused the cut, surely Fury's orbital would have cracked too. I tend to think it's down to not wearing the correct headgear, and the side of Smakichi's gloves caused the cut. Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, there's been plenty of elbow-related cuts that haven't also broke the orbital. I mean, it can absorb a fair amount of impact, although, we have seen orbital bones being broken in fights quite regularly over recent years. Sultan Ibrahimov, Turkey does seem quite self-obsessed and likes to think himself the saviour of the sport. He kind of is at the moment. Don't know if he'd allow for the fight not to happen for his reputation alone. Yeah, I mean, surely that's why he's put the $10 million thing in place and the replacement opponents. I mean, in terms of being self-obsessed, I think anyone with a lot of money who's very successful and powerful, there's going to be a big ego there as well. You'd have to be, an absolute saint not to let that come into play. But he has transformed boxing largely for the better in the last couple of years. Now, the motivations for doing so might not be what we'd all like them to be. But in terms of the impact on the sport as a whole, I haven't seen much to complain about just yet. George Hearn says Fury deserves to lose. He's not a proper athlete and doesn't take boxing seriously. I'm not sure that's entirely true. I think he goes in fits and spurts. I think his mood changes. We know he struggled in the past with mental health problems. I think his mood goes up and down, and I think his relationship with boxing and how he views the sport goes up and down as a result. He's always been a huge student of the sport. You know, he loves the old-time fighters. There's certain achievements he's wanted to tick off, but then the next moment he'll talk about retiring. So I think that's a big part of it, his kind of erratic nature, rather than the fact that he doesn't take boxing seriously as a general rule. Ambient Warrior, Stitch Duranda said that cut can be pretty well managed if it were to open up again. That'll be reassuring, I guess. I mean, Fury's obviously coped with a pretty bad cut in the Otto Valiant fight, so he's not, unaccustomed to it. Randy Orton, I mean, mate, what I wouldn't give for this to be the real Randy Orton. Says Fury accidentally upcutted himself after loading his gloves. Ambient Warrior again, Fury just has his ups and downs. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. B8, this fight will defo happen, thanks to the huge pot of money Turkey has waiting for Fury. But surely that huge pot of money was waiting on the original date. So if it's a genuine injury, then, a genuine injury could happen again. And if anything, it's probably more likely because of the scar tissue around the eye. Citing Ibragimov, even if Fury beats AJ and Usyk, he doesn't have enough consistency to be classed as an all-time great. Yeah, it's a difficult one because the kind of stick that's used to beat Fury with is that, yes, he's got those 2 big wins over Klitschko and Wilder. 2 big wins over Wilder and 1 over Klitschko. But there was such a big gap in between them, and the depth of his resume doesn't really support all-time great status outside of those big wins. But then if he were to beat Usyk, who's a pound-for-pound contender in his own right, former undisputed champion at cruiserweight, unified champion at heavyweight, and a lot of people picking Usyk to beat Fury as well, even though Fury, I imagine, probably already is the favourite with the bookies. I think you could make a case for Fury certainly going into the Hall of Fame and being an all-time great. I wouldn't think he'd retire straight after Usyk if he wins either. So let's wait and see. If Usyk wins, he's definitely a Hall of Famer and an all-time great, having, adding his amateur achievements to cruiserweight and heavyweight by that point. It'd be hard to argue against Usyk going into the elite if he's not already there. Ramoni Mode XD also says, happens in all fights. He's talking about the cut. So I think that's it from the chat for now. Now, we've talked about Frank Warren finding a new enemy. Conor Benn could probably give Warren a few tips on that score because he's been seeking out enemies, both old and new, presumably because he really wants a big fight next. Now, he spoke to Eddie Hearn, apparently, and said he had a list of 5 fighters he wanted. It has to be one of these 5. And I think I looked through it, and as is often the case with Eddie Hearn-related stuff of this nature, you pick out the one name that seems most likely, and you think the others are all to come to nothing. So I think Errol Spence was on there, Eubank Jr. was on there, Kell Brook was on there. And I looked down, and right at the bottom of the list was, who was it? Oh, Mario Barrios. And I thought, that'll be the one. Because he's the one that's most likely to be easily made, probably affordable, and could take place either in the UK if Benn's appeal goes the way they want it to. Well, it's not Benn's appeal, it's the board's appeal and UKAD's appeal. But if it goes the way Ben wants it to, then that could be sold in the UK. But equally, it could be sold as a pretty decent fight in the US as well. But he seems to be calling everyone out, and then people have called him out, and he's dismissing them. Josh Kelly being one of them I saw on X. What do you think, Ayman? Who do you think Ben should fight next? But who do you think Ben's likely to fight next?
Yeah, I actually quite like that Mario Barrios fight, to be fair. I think Barrios was coming off with a win against Yordenis Ugas, really kind of put a beating on Ugas, who was going into that fight, I think, the favourite. I think, obviously, Ugas is probably feeling the effects of his career heading into that fight as well, too. But nonetheless, Barrios got the win. And Barrios is very much an all-action, entertaining fighter. Throws a lot of punches, doesn't really take a step backwards, does take the step forwards. That's kind of the same sort of thing with Ben, although Ben was pushed back a little bit more in the last fight with Pete Dobson, which I was ringside for, and shipped a lot of shots, actually. Dobson, although he didn't get the win, some people were picking him for the win in that fight. At least exposed some of the holes in the game, which haven't been exposed for a while, considering Ben's opponents have been the likes of Chris Algieri, good fighter, but not the fighter he once was. Samuel Vargas, good fighter, not the fighter he once was. Van Heerden as well, too. Credible enough opponent if it was a few years back, not the fighter he once was. So that kind of picking off those sort of fringish world level type names, or ones that have accomplished something in Algeria, former world champion, such. So to get Barrios in the ring is a much more of a live opponent than the others that we've seen in recent future, but doesn't bode well as that big fight that maybe we were looking for Ben when the likes of Eubank Jr. was talked about. That seems to have been and gone now, really. Even with the appeal, if it's successful in that point, that kind of feels like the ship has sailed. Errol Spence, I don't know, he's on his own sort of timeline, isn't he, with the recovery from injury? And I imagine someone like Spence, I know he hasn't in the past, but he might want that softish touch before he goes into a big fight. Not that I'm saying that Ben is that big fight, but even then to just have a little bit softer throw to go back into like a Crawford rematch or whatever it is, if he even decides to continue on. We'll see what he's like. He will give us the intentions.
So a bit of a left field one here from Thunder Road. Says, would you and Ayman consider using your middle initials to sound more professional, like Gareth A. Davies and Stephen A. Smith? Ayman A. Khan, like the musician Akon, has a nice ring to it. What do you think, Akon?
I don't know. I don't like my middle initial, so I'll pass. Oh, sorry, my middle name, so I'll pass on that. But no, I went by a different moniker in the past as well too, which is my Twitter name, and I've ditched that as well now. So I'll pass on that, but I won't pass on a Gervonta Davis fight against Conor Benn, because Davis, wasn't he reported to be wanting to have a fight in the UK this year, or at least his next fight will be in the UK, which is a very weird thing for Davis to want to come back. You feel like all his opponents would be over in America. But with everything going on in America right now with the deals and such, where does Davis kind of stand with everything? So that makes sense for Gervonta Davis and Conor Benn, to Davis coming up this time to welterweight. I don't think Conor Benn's going to drop down any further, really, though you feel like Ben probably maybe could do, but I don't think he would. But would Davis want to take on Ben? Does he particularly care about Ben's current situation? Could that happen in the UK, or could it happen elsewhere? I don't know. It's just an appealing enough fight, and I'm sure a lot of boxing fans, hardcore boxing fans, would like to see Davis and Ben in the ring. Brook, I think that's a bit of an outside shout as well to happen. Although, look, I know a lot of people want to see Kell Brook sail off into the sunset, but there seems to be a bit of life in Kell Brook, who seems to have interest in returning back to the ring, although against more so Eubank Jr. than Conor Benn. Could Kell Brook be coaxed back in if enough money is put in front of him to fight Conor Benn? I think there's still life in that. So most likely for me, Barrios. Then I don't know where this Davis's thing is going, so I'll probably say Brook, then Davis. Josh Kelly put out a pretty cool little tweet. I thought it was very, very good. Don't think it's likely that we'll see Josh Kelly in the ring with Conor Benn for quite a while, but I don't know. I think the Barrios one seems to be the one we're heading towards.
Yeah, I think Josh Kelly would be a really good fight, but because they're with different promoters and Kelly hasn't got the profile of a Eubank Jr., for example, and I guess that's still a possibility. He's probably not going to get that fight. That's what Danny B. Flexen thinks anyway. I'm not sure about that. Like Michael B. Jordan, I don't know if I can pull it off. I'm not like Michael B. Jordan, funnily enough. We often get confused for each other, though.
Danny, sorry to interrupt your flow. I apologize. I should have mentioned this as well. The fight I actually want to see is Conor Benn and David Avanesyan. That's the fight I want to see. Don't know why I didn't mention that. And if I was Ben's team or looking at Avanesyan now, I know they said the profile thing and whatever, putting that to a side, I see David Avanesyan as someone who's been beaten, he's been out of the ring, he's had a bounce back fight that didn't really mean too much. And if you're looking at someone right now who's a credible name, boxing hardcore fans who you want to appeal to, want to see that fight, want to see you in tough, you'd be looking at Avanesyan, someone else. That's the time to get him. Coming off a defeat, bouncing back, but not having activity. You've had a bit more of activity. That's the fight I point towards if it's not any of the other names.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, if you're going to make the Avanesyan fight, that's one that does need to take place in the UK. Now, I agree. I think Avanesyan is a great test for Ben. I think he's coming off that loss to Crawford as well. So if Ben could do a better job on him, I mean, he was dominated against Crawford, but if Ben could maybe stop him earlier or something like that, or even does as good a job as Crawford. It immediately kind of elevates his name, puts his profile up there, and then he can start calling for those bigger fights with some level of credibility. But so much rests, and in terms of the offers being made as well, if the money that's being put on offer for the likes of Gervonta Davis are based on Conor Benn's ability to sell well in the UK, or the ability of a Gervonta to come over and make a big stir in this country, we need to know if Ben is going to be able to fight here. Now, just give to people out there a bit of an update. So Conor Benn was planning to apply for a British Boxing Board of Control license, a new one, after his one was suspended, or he actually gave it back initially when the failed test first came out. And the board said, Robert Smith had said the board would not consider a license application from Conor Benn until the outcome of the appeal from both the Board of Control and from UKAD against the independent panel's decision to lift Conor Benn's suspension. So Conor Benn was suspended from fighting in the UK after the VADA tests, the two separate tests that came up as adverse findings for clomiphene. Since then, an independent panel listened to Benn's evidence, decided to lift the suspension. The rumour is, and this hasn't been confirmed, I don't think, but it's because of the jurisdiction that UKAD don't have a right to make the ruling on a VADA test, or VADA test shouldn't be considered. But whatever the reason, the suspension was lifted. So in essence, Conor Benn would be able to fight in the UK based on that ruling. But then the board and UKAD both appealed against that decision. They felt it was wrong. They felt he should still be under suspension. And the board will not consider Conor Benn for a new Board of Control license until their appeal has been heard once again. And that should be later this month. That's what they were saying. There's now, Eddie Hearn hasn't revealed the actual date, but he said there is a date in place for February. So we expect that soon. And then Conor Benn can then make an informed decision over where and who against his next fight should be. But I think Avanesian would be a cracking fight. I think Michael McKinson as well, with his recent fight over in the US against Virgil Ortiz, he proved a lot of his mettle and his toughness. And he's a very skillful fighter as well, very awkward. I think that would be a really good test for Ben. I think McKinson and Avanesian both. But the same thing, they need to be in the UK. They're not fights that should be in the US. I can't imagine Hearn's made a massive profit on Ben's last couple of fights against Peter Dobson and the one before that when Ben first came back. I think they want him to fight in the UK. I think so much of boxing's taking place in Saudi at the moment. You need, and Hearn mentioned this in a recent interview, you need those big UK stars. You need to remember the UK market. And Conor Benn's key to that. He does do big numbers over here, both digitally and on Sky Sports viewing figures and so on. Sorry, not Sky Sports, the Zone viewing figures and so on. Oof, strike me down to say a few Hail Marys for getting that wrong. But yeah, so Conor Benn, we need to know if he can fight back in the UK. And then the likes of Avanesian and Michael McKinson, even Kell Brook, become much more likely. Eubank Jr. too, because once Conor Benn's got a board license again, I think that brings that fight right back on the table. But until then, and if we are planning, I'm not saying we, but if Eddie Hearn's planning for Ben's next fight to be in the US, I think Mario Barrios and maybe as an outside choice, Gervonta Davis are more likely. Let's just have a look at the chat. Thunder Road is saying Eddie's a salesman, contradictions galore. I mean, go figure. Tell us something we don't know. Sultan Ibragimov, Eddie said he sees no problem with Conor fighting a 45-year-old Pac-Man, but said Thurman versus Zoo was a pointless fight. I mean, to be fair, Pac-Man does have that win over Thurman, albeit a number of years ago now. Who else have we got? Sultan Ibragimov again. Does Eddie have long-term plans for Conor, or is it cash him out now before we find his ceiling? I think a lot of that will depend on the outcome of the appeal. Because I think if Conor Benn can fight once again in the UK, there's been no evidence yet, because we haven't seen him fight here, to suggest that his commercial drawing power has been dimmed by the controversy. So if he comes back in the UK and doesn't sell very well anymore, then yeah, maybe it will be time to cash him out against the big name. However, if his commercial power is as strong as it was previously, or even stronger as he goes up in levels, then they can spin it out for as long as they want. The whole thing with Conor Benn was once he reaches the elite level at welterweight, he's got to fight Spence or Crawford. And I wouldn't recommend either of those fights for Ben right now, even after we saw Spence drubbed by Crawford. But, there's plenty of fringe contenders and around. Mario Barrios, we already talked about. Your Dennis Ugas is still there. Keith Thurman, as someone mentioned, albeit he's fighting at 154 next against Zoo. But if he loses that fight and then moves back down, that can be made. There's a number of fights at and around the top level at 147. I know Ben was trying to reignite things, or Adrian Broner actually was trying to reignite things with Ben. It's not a fight I particularly want to see at this stage of Broner's career. But yeah, so they could keep this Conor Benn money train going for quite some time if they choose to, and if they feel it's still worthwhile for them. Who else? Sorting Bragumov again. Can you ask Robert Smith if rules are now that if you fail a test and then sign for a fight, you have to declare the failed test? If I get a chance to interview Robert Smith, I don't think he's done anything for a little while, I will ask him. He seems to do a lot more talk sport than he does the other YouTube outlets at the moment. So maybe you should have a word with Simon Jordan and see if he wants to ask Robert Smith about that. Who's this? Ramoni Mode XD says 39 now, right? He fought a washed Khan and performed meh. Yeah, that's a fair point too. On Kell Brook, obviously. Yeah, I mean, washed Khan is certainly true, but I guess that doesn't tell us how much Kell Brook's got left because of what he was up against. So we'll have to wait and see. But Brooks keeps saying that that's the sort of fight, or Eubank Jr. is the sort of fight that will get him out of bed, you know, make him train again, etc., etc. He doesn't seem interested in fighting for a world title again. He doesn't seem interested in fighting another top-level fighter that hasn't got that huge name behind them. So you've got to wonder how much motivation Kell Brook has and what his realistic idea of what he has left is, because he will know himself what level he can compete at. Where else? Oh, DB Cooper 1 says, evening, chaps. I see Mr. Khan is back from his week-long bender in Vegas. How was it? Ayman, I guess that's one for you.
Week-long bender, it was not. You know, I'm a bit of a gamer, so I tend to stay late sometimes and game a lot because the obviously time passes when you're having fun and all that. So I thought I'd be adjusted to the lag or the time difference, but I crashed so hard most of the nights. Supposed to go out a couple of nights in a row with some of the media members, crashed at 9 p.m. Vegas time, did it the same thing the next night. It was only on the final night, which ended up being a Sunday, where I said, look, I've got to get to Fremont Street. I want to see it, I want to experience it. Push myself, and only ended up having a couple of hours there, and I went straight back home. So no antics for myself. It was very much a debut performance, which left a lot to be desired.
Now, we've talked about what we could get in the future in terms of Conor Benn and also hopefully on May the 18th, Fury Usyk. Just to remind people, if you haven't already voted in our poll, please do. We're asking, will Fury versus Usyk finally happen on May the 18th? Yes or no? Very simple choice there. But let's talk about something that actually did happen, and that's Hamzah Sheeraz making a huge statement, climbing his way towards the world scene at middleweight. The unbeaten Londoner dispatched Liam Williams in brutal fashion at the weekend. Ayman was there ringside, and a lot's going to be made, and rightly so, I think, of the condition of Williams and whether he's got much left to offer the sport at this stage of his career. But we also have to keep in mind that Hamzah Sheeraz was stepping up in class, certainly on paper, and got the job done with ruthless aggression, to use an old WWE term. Ayman, what did you make of it?
Yeah, look, everything, the surrounding stuff aside, I thought Hamzah Sheeraz was excellent, and from a prospect turning into that contender, which has been a contender now for a bit, looking to push forward to that fringe world scene and forwards in 2024. Like, he did everything that you'd ask for. He was assertive in the build up. He wasn't shying from the spotlight, not that he ever has done, but with the spotlight that keeps burning brighter with the levels and tests that are coming up with the likes of Liam Williams, who's only 31, mind. You know, he handled it very, very well, and he handled it very well on the night. It didn't seem really that it got out of any real gear, though, which is the thing. And this is where you start pushing in the surrounding stuff around it. And I said to Liam, like, and it was addressed in the press conference as well, like, you know, what of your punch resistance off of the back of the Eubank Jr. fight? And I said to him, first of all, sorry, I'll wind it back a slight bit. Like, the issue is that you mentioned outside of the Eubank Jr. fight as to a reason as to why the punch resistance wasn't there was because you'd done the weight wrong in the final week to the fight. So have you done the weight right here? And he seemed to say that, look, everything's fine on my side. Like, I've not crashed anything. I've done it appropriately. There were other reasons surrounding the Eubank Jr. fight. So all systems forward for this fight. And the punch resistance stuff, don't know where it comes from, but you'll see. But then when it came down to it, it just seemed that it wasn't the Liam Williams of old, really, trying to take as little as away from Hamzah. But I think you have to factor that in. And then I said to Frank Warren, I said to Hamzah Sheeraz, mightn't you worry that you might not get the credit for it, considering some of the question marks surrounding Liam Williams, his resistance? And they said, no, look, this was us and not Liam. There's nothing to say that he, had those problems come into this fight. And you can sort of say that because of the bounce back he's had, a couple of bounce back fights, but not really against any real sort of opposition. So I don't know. It's up to, it seemed to me from the judgment online that people really kind of were gushing over Hamzah Sheeraz and not really looking and scrutinizing Liam Williams here. But for me, I think it didn't say too much, but we've got more of an elevation and rise towards the top for Hamzah Sheeraz.
Sultan Ibrahimov in the chat says Williams was defo shot before the fight. Eubank's not a puncher and dropped him countless times with jabs. Ramoni Mode XD in a similar vein says Williams needs to stop fighting now. This is a true example of lost punch resistance. I mean, I have to agree. Seeing him go down the way he did, he looked almost frail when he fell and when he hit the canvas, and bewildered when he got up. And it was the same against Eubank. And when you're getting dropped several times early in fights, obviously Eubank, for whatever reason, gave him the opportunity to get back into the fight, and he did that well. Hamzah Sheeraz was ruthless and clinical, and he never gave him that opportunity. But if you're getting dropped early in fights on a regular basis and you're looking pretty shaken up by what would otherwise be innocuous shots, now don't get me wrong, I don't want to take even a soft jab, or comparatively soft jab from Hamzah Sheeraz or Chris Eubank Jr. But if that's happening and you're previously traded on not just your skills, but your toughness and your punch resistance, then that is cause for concern. Now, Liam Williams and the people around him will know his current status and his level better than anyone. And I hope Gary Lockett, they were together from the start of Liam's career and have recently reunited. I know that he's got his best interests at heart. He was, waving the towel for the fight to be stopped very early on. And you wouldn't do that unless you truly cared about your fighter. And I know Gary well anyway. So you would hope that he'll put an arm around the shoulder now and speak to Liam about what really is best for him going forward. Because from a, purely sporting perspective as well, when you lose to a Hamzah Sheeraz, who may go all the way, we don't know yet, it's kind of domestic level or just beyond. Does Liam Williams want to be fighting his way back at domestic level? Because he's done it once previously after he lost those fights to Liam Smith. He rebuilt, he won the British title at super welterweight and then built himself back up and got back to world level and did really well doing it. But at 31 years of age, with all the experience behind him, with the question marks surrounding his punch resistance, does he want to go for all that again? But flipping the script over to Hamzah Sheeraz, who, as DB Cooper 1 says, is exciting. Would love to see him do well at world level. Britain needs it. The Yanks are taking over. Him training in LA is a huge bonus, it seems. I'm really impressed by the fact that Hamzah Sheeraz trains over in the States, not just because... Do you know what impresses me more? And this is no slight on Ricky Funes, who is Sheeraz's trainer and has looked really good in that role so far. Hamzah Sheeraz hasn't made all those sacrifices and gone to train over in the UK because he's got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work with a Freddie Roach or, in past days, an Emmanuel Stewart. He's done it with a relatively little-known trainer beyond the hardcore boxing fraternity in Ricky Funes, who I'm sure is great, but it just shows the level of commitment on the part of Hamzah Sheeraz that he hasn't been offered one of those big-name trainers and, it can only happen right now if it's going to happen at all. And he's still taking himself away from everything. And we saw him struggle at times back at super welterweight. I'm sure making weight was a large part of it for someone who's at least 6'3", maybe taller. But middleweight, he's looked an absolute beast, hasn't put a foot wrong since he stepped up in weight. And I guess the thoughts now turn to who should be next for him, because I know there was a lot of talking about Chris Eubank Jr. For Hamzah Sheeraz in the build-up to Williams' fight. And it seems like a natural next step because they've both beaten Liam. And you could argue that Hamzah Sheeraz, not even argue, Hamzah Sheeraz definitely beat him in more clinical fashion and much earlier. But it's whether it's the same version of Liam Williams would be open to doubt. I'm not sure how realistic that fight is. Sheeraz being with Frank Warren and Eubank being with Wasserman, and probably with his eyes on bigger fights, certainly commercially and at world level. So, Ayman, who do you think would be a more realistic but still helpful in terms of his progression next fight for Hamzah Sheeraz?
I think he'd be looking at the British title, though maybe he might feel he might be a little bit above that level or not. But I think the British title is probably something that he looked to try and gain on the way up to get into that world level. That's going to be contested between Nathan Heaney and Brad Pauls. But the carrot there for Nathan Heaney is that come through that fight and you're fighting at the Stoke Stadium. And I don't think Hamzah Sheeraz would turn down a bite at a stadium fight, which elevates him, although it might not be the fight specifically he wants, or maybe even the title specifically he wants. But winning that gets you further legitimacy and gets you a favor from the boxing public. Winning that in a stadium is a very good look for you as the opponent as well, too. You might be the favorite in the fight, but you're still the opponent in the fight, and you have to deal with that stadium booing you, which is another precursor to the top. Because when you get to that top there, those are the sort of environments that you're facing. Those are the sort of environments, let's not forget here, if you're out there in America, you're looking to placate yourself to your American audience, American fans, but you're not an American. You're a British Asian. You're going to be someone you have to placate to them. So you might initially get booed. You might initially have to do a few things to win those fight fans over. He's got the style that definitely would win the fight fans over in America, but to get that environment where you're in against the heat of the favorite, I think is something that Sheeraz might want to tick the box of. So I feel that that's probably a logical step for Hamzah Sheeraz. The likes and talks of Ammo Williams. I think Ammo is a bit too soon for Hamzah Sheeraz right now, although he doesn't seem to be too far off that level. But those are kind of the fight that sticks out to me really is probably Nathan Heaney. Or if he wants to, if he doesn't look at the British title, then maybe looking to position and go for that world title shot against Janabek. I know that Franklin obviously has good favouring with the WBO, so could they get that position in there whilst Heaney waits and has his fight against Brad Pauls, and then Hamzah Sheeraz has that crack at the world title, and if Sheeraz wins, then you've got that stadium fight again for the world title this time around. If not, then Heaney goes for that title, and they bring Janabek over. So those are the options I'm looking for Hamzah Sheeraz right now.
So Sultan Ibragimov says Sheeraz versus Ammo Williams, Felix Cash or Nathan Heaney. I'd like to see Sheeraz against Felix Cash, although having been out for as long as he has, I'm sure he doesn't want to go straight back in with a young, hungry, unbeaten puncher. But yeah, and I was going to say I'd like to see it on the Warren versus Hearn card on the undercard of Bivol against Beterbiev. But as I've been informed a few times now, Felix Cash is a free agent currently. So maybe that won't. But then there's the transfer window. Let's not forget that they've talked about. DB Cooper 1 says, Frank Warren's eye for talent is underrated as fuck, in my opinion. Sheeraz, Italma, and loads more. None of the cherry picking of Team GB Olympics. Get Sheeraz on the Saudi Matchroom versus Queensbury card. Yeah, that's what I was just kind of alluding to there. But yeah, Frank Warren's eye for talent is underrated, AF. But it's not just him. I think it's the people around him as well. A lot of people that have been in the sport for a long time that know what they're doing as well. So I think they're scouting around. They're in different gyms. They know their stuff. I think it's fair to say. You know, you look at Sheeraz and Italma and people like that. They're not with the big name trainers. So it's not just a case of knowing who's training with the top people or, as you said, GB Olympians. They're actually going around the smaller amateur gyms. They know who's coming up. They know who's performing well. Like Warren, compared to his competitors, signs a lot of junior amateurs who never have a senior career. I think Daniel Dubois only had a couple of senior fights, for example. And there's a few others in that mold. So they're obviously keeping an eye on them from that junior or youth age range and signing them up so they can start transferring that skill set to the professional side of the sport rather than stay amateur for too long, which I think is pretty smart. Who else? What's happened to Felix Cash? What promotion is he with now? Says Morgan Harrison. Apparently he's a free agent. We were talking about him a few weeks ago and we were told that was the case, but I haven't interviewed. I know he did a raft of interviews not too long ago when he was at the gym, when we were doing some other interviews with other people. I think it was when we were interviewing Dan Aziz. It might have been that day, or Joshua Boazzi, one of the two. So someone talking about Ben there. Cash has been out too long, says Matty Howard. Yeah, maybe not for his future, but certainly to go straight back in with someone like Hamzah Sheeraz. So yeah, now we're switching. I see the headline's already been changed. Probably a bit too early there. Mod Father Vinny is going to have to go and sit on a naughty step. But what might have been, because for people out there, you'll know that this Saturday should have been Tyson Fury against Oleksandr Usyk. May the 18th is the new date, but it was originally scheduled for this weekend, February the 17th, until the cut that shocked the world occurred. Or maybe the cut that shocked the world actually occurred earlier, if you believe Alex Krassyuk. But yeah, so that's what might have been. And I guess, Ayman, I wanted to ask you, this was going to be the biggest fight of the year so far, if it had taken place on February the 17th. Is it now Joshua and Ngannou that's the biggest fight of the year so far when it happens? Or does him being a UFC, predominantly a UFC fighter, leave a bit of a sour taste? Is there another fight later in the year that's been scheduled or mooted that you're looking forward to more than Joshua and Ngannou?
No, I mean, as a boxing fan, for me, still Fury Usyk stands to be the most important, the fight I'm looking forward to most in the year. With that, all right, if you want to take that out of the equation, then sure, AJ Ngannou I think has a lot more casual appeal with the crossover element to it, with the frailty and improvements we've seen in Joshua in recent years, with the punch power that we've now seen proven to cross over in the boxing sphere after he sent Tyson Fury crashing over to the canvas, brings that broad appeal to that fight for sure, and may probably elevate it really when it comes down to actual numbers, social media numbers, UFC fight fan numbers, boxing fan numbers, over Fury Usyk, because Fury, great British interest and American interest. Then with Usyk, maybe not so much. I know he's been a road warrior in multiple countries, but I don't think he's really kind of crossed over to that American audience, although the hardcore boxing fans in America will very much respect him for what he is. But on a casual sense, no, I don't think so. But so you've got those two elements definitely in AJ and Ngannou, so maybe that will probably take that number one mantle over Fury Usyk. But then again, that Haney versus Garcia fight, Haney's definitely getting and rising into that position where a number of fighters are jockeying for that Mayweather mantle, Davis being one of them, Brian Garcia being one of them, Haney being one of them, Shakur Stevenson being another one of them, that are trying to get that real pay-per-view star to them. And with another fight against Ryan Garcia, although he's been beaten already, still has that real pulling power, still has that golden boy feel to him. And I think that might be a sleeper fight, in a sense of a fight that might actually, when it all comes down to it, be the fight that really pulls in the eyes to the sport.
For me, it's all about June the 1st. I have been wanting to see Bivol against Beterbiev, maybe for longer than I wanted to see Crawford Spence. Regardless, that one's happened. So Bivol Beterbiev, absolutely mouth-watering clash. Two unbeatens, very different styles, should mesh very well. Finally answer the question of who is better. I think that's one that if we ran a poll, it would be almost 50-50. They've got as many backers, both in boxing and in the fan base as well. Absolutely amazing fight. I'm looking forward to that far more than I am AJ and Ngannou, although I recognise the former is a much bigger commercial attraction than the latter. But as a real boxing fan, I can't wait to see Bivol and Beterbiev cross swords. I've long said I think Bivol gets the job done. Beterbiev's recent form's been far more impressive than Bivol's, but that hasn't quite swayed me just yet. Not that my opinion matters more than most other people's or anything like that. But not only that, we also get to see Warren against Hearn on the undercard. Not literally, as people have had a go at me already today for clickbait. So Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn aren't fighting each other on the June 1st card, but they are providing 5 fighters each to clash at 5 different weights to settle their dispute, if you like, between them. Although, what if one of the fights is a draw and they get 2 wins each? Is there a trophy? And if so, do they share it? So many questions. But I can't wait to see who they draft in for this event. I'm not expecting huge names because it isn't the main event of the show. The show's going to be sold on Bivol Beterbiev and the team concept of Hearn against Warren. But I do expect well-matched fights and fights we wouldn't normally see, and we won't see in the UK, of course, unless they start working together on shows here as well. So, yeah, really looking forward to that show. I think that's the one that really catches your eye. It's a shame it's so far away, June the 1st. But the longer the time goes on and fighters that we want to see on that show haven't got fights announced, it makes it even more likely that they could appear on it and go against each other. So we can really play fantasy matchmaker for as long as possible. But that's the one that's really looking good for me. DB Cooper one seems to agree here. He says, by far the best things the Saudis have done, they're literally making fights for boxing fans, not just the big ones for the masses. Tell me that 1 year ago, I'd have died of laughter. Matty Howard says Beterbiev is a beast. Sunset says Beterbiev via power. Matty Howard says Bivol Beterbiev can't wait. Yeah, I mean, I'm sticking with Bivol for now. I don't think I'll change. I mean, they're not going to fight again before June the 1st. So I'm not going to change unless Bivol looks, I don't know, absolutely wrecked at the scales or turns his car over 5 times like Spence did or whatever. But I'm going to stick with Bivol for now, and hopefully it'll be a healthy underdog for when I head down the bookies before the fight happens. Does anyone head down the bookies anymore? Just as an aside, I'll be online, I'm sure, if I can remember any of my passwords. Really appreciate you all tuning in. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up. For people watching on playback, obviously you've missed the live chat, which is one of the best parts, if not the best part of the show. But please do leave comments because we will respond to some of those. And please do subscribe to Seconds Out if you haven't already. We're heading towards that 800,000 subscriber mark at a rate of knots, and we want to take you there with us. But as is customary, I always give the last word to my co-host, and that is Mr. Ayman Khan. Ayman, what have you got to say?
Yeah, I'm just going to use this moment as well to bring in another fight of thought, because someone is making a big announcement. I believe in the UK it'll be tomorrow. I don't know what time it'll be tomorrow. I should get that up. But Canelo Alvarez is making an important decision about his future. And there was talk about him facing the Jamal Charlo. He's already fought Jamel. If I got it mixed up, it's the other way around. No worries. But that seems to be a bit of a red herring because that's gone cold. Then you've seen the preliminary talks of Jaime Munguia. Is that another red herring? It would be a good fight, but is that an important decision, a career decision, maybe for Mexico, but not on the world scene? There has been a little bit of talks and whispers about Terence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez, Terence Crawford, whichever way you want to chop it up, as those two fighters mixing up, because before the Spence Crawford fight, there's talk about Spence going up and fighting Canelo Alvarez. Might that be the big announcement? Might that be the biggest fight of the year if that gets announced? That might be the case. Danny, you want to say something?
I just want to bring in the poll results. I gave you the last word too soon, unfortunately, but you will still get the last word, that is. Fury versus Usyk. Will it happen on May the 18th? We sent it out to the chat and we got literally hundreds of votes. No, say 52% of our audience, a big fat no, 47% saying yes. So a majority of the Seconds Out Live audience do not believe that Fury Usyk will actually happen on May the 18th. I think that's jarring. And if Frank Warren's watching this, I would, take a seat first and have people around you, because you're not going to be happy. Ayman, sorry to interrupt. Back to you.
Yeah, it's still pretty close for me, though. A matter of percentages in it there. But no, it's a bit of a damning indictment there just in general. But yeah, might we be talking about Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez? That could be a big fight. I know that maybe we'd end up going live, or at least doing some sort of breaking news reaction, should that be the case. But that would be, if we factored that in, Canelo Alvarez's position, a big fight in the year. But it's been great. Back on here, the Seconds Out Live. We're back on again next Monday as well.
Wait, Ayman, can I just ask, is that you volunteering to do the breaking news reaction?
Yeah, hell yeah, I'll be on that.
Good. Then I endorse that view. I think we should definitely do a breaking news reaction.
Definitely. But yeah, breaking news or not, we'll be here to break news, to speak to you every Monday as well, too, on the Seconds Out Live. Can't do it without you guys. Can't do it without Danny. Can't do it with the background people. Don't want to mention his name. Sometimes he doesn't deserve it, but I'll give it him. This Seconds Out Live comes with a kiss from Vinny Kiss. So thank you to Vinny as well. But much appreciated. Make sure you haven't already, click the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, because we've got much more boxing content coming your way this week and forward. Thank you so much again. Much appreciated.